It's me, thinking out loud. I'm just going to say it. No code is bullshit. Not because it doesn't work, not because tools are useless, and not because people can't build meaningful things with them. Problem is way it gets talked about and sold. Like complexity has somehow disappeared, or hard parts of building systems have been politely removed for everyone's convenience. That part to me is the fiction, the misrepresentation, the framing. People hear a phrase like no code, and it sounds like freedom from technical consequence. Like you can skip the messy middle and still arrive at something solid, reliable, production ready. And I understand why that message is attractive. I really do. Most people are not looking for complexity, they're looking for momentum. But I've been around technology long enough to know that when something is presented as frictionless, I start looking for where the friction went because it went somewhere. It always does. So this isn't me attacking the tools. I use them. I see the value. This is me being honest about what they are and what they are not. I think the phrase itself does a lot of damage. No code gets heard as no technical knowledge needed, no architecture needed, no logic needed, no real risk. Just connect a few things, click a few buttons, maybe prompt an AI system, and now you've built a product. That's the implied story. And again, I'm not saying people are foolish for believing it. The ecosystem encourages that belief. The demos are smooth, the language is reassuring, the complexity is hidden behind templates and interfaces that feel approachable. So the conclusion becomes if it feels easy, it must be simple. But easy to start is not the same as easy to sustain. And looking clean on the surface is not the same as being sound underneath. That gap matters. Because once people start believing that production ready systems require almost no technical thinking, they begin underestimating what they're actually responsible for. And that's usually where the trouble begins. Not with bad intentions, just with a misleading sense of what building really asks of you. I'm saying this from use, not from distance. I've built with these tools. I've used AI to generate logic. I've worked inside no code environments and watched them accelerate things that would have taken longer otherwise. So none of this is abstract for me. And one thing I've seen over and over is that AI does not always generate correct logic. Sometimes it gives you something that looks plausible enough to move forward with. That can be the most dangerous kind of wrong, actually. Not obviously broken, just broken in a way that waits. I've had plenty of moments where I looked at an output and immediately thought, no, that's not right. Not because I'm unusually gifted, just because I've spent enough years around systems to recognize when the shape of something is off. A dependency doesn't make sense. A flow breaks under a certain condition. A piece of logic assumes too much. And in those moments, the tool didn't save me. Judgment did. Experience did. The ability to stop and question what I was seeing did. That's really the distinction I keep coming back to. What gets lost in a lot of no code conversations is the hidden layer underneath the interface. The part nobody really advertises because it ruins the fantasy a little. You still have to think about data structure. You still have to think about normalization, even if you're not using that word. You still have to think about logical flow, dependencies, edge cases, and what happens when something fails. Error handling doesn't disappear because the screen is friendlier. System design doesn't go away because the wiring is hidden. If anything, hidden complexity can be harder for people to respect because they can't see it. They only feel the convenience of the surface layer. And that's the part I wish was discussed more plainly. If you don't understand the underlying structure, you can end up just clicking buttons and hoping it works. Maybe it does work for a while. Maybe it works in the demo. Maybe it works until a real person uses it in a real way you didn't anticipate. But hidden complexity is still complexity. It hasn't been removed. It's just been pushed out of sight. For me, this becomes serious when people move from experimenting to delivering. When they start building products, selling solutions, charging clients, making promises, without really understanding what they built. That's where my tone changes a little. Not because I think people need to be shamed, I don't, but because the consequences stop being theoretical. The issue is not that someone used a no code platform. The issue is confidence without comprehension. It's presenting something as stable because it looks finished. It's assuming that because a workflow runs, it's reliable. It's treating output as understanding. Those are not the same thing. And I want to be careful here because I'm not attacking individuals. A lot of this behavior is being rewarded. Speed is rewarded. Packaging is rewarded. Certainty is rewarded. But if you're responsible for something that affects other people, then your understanding matters. Maybe more than your speed, actually. Because people live with the outcome of what you built, not the excitement you felt while building it. What saved me, honestly, was that I can code. Not in some dramatic, identity defining way, just practically. It gave me a way to verify things, to debug, to inspect logic instead of trusting the presentation of it, to validate AI output instead of assuming fluency meant correctness. That changed the outcome a lot because when something was off, I could trace it. When the architecture felt weak, I could see why. When the flow looked clean but behaved badly, I could step in and correct it. That's not superiority, it's just leverage. It's having another layer of visibility. And I think that matters because sometimes these conversations turn into camps. Either you're technical and skeptical, or you're modern and moving fast. I don't find that framing useful. The only point I'm making is that understanding gave me options. It protected me from over trusting tools that are powerful but not self aware. There's a real difference between using acceleration and being carried by it. What I actually believe is pretty simple. No code is powerful. It is fast. It is accessible in ways that genuinely matter. It opens doors for people who might never have started otherwise. And I think that is a good thing. I'm not interested in pretending those gains aren't real. But it is not magic. It is not self correcting. It is not foolproof. And accessibility does not cancel responsibility. Those things have to sit together. Otherwise, the conversation becomes dishonest. I found real value in reducing friction. I like tools that help people move. I like anything that creates more room for thinking instead of less. But I'm not impressed by convenience alone. I want to know what holds when pressure shows up, what breaks, what scales badly, what becomes fragile the moment real complexity enters the room. That, to me, is still the standard. So the real truth, at least where I've landed for now, is this. No code doesn't remove complexity, it hides it. That's the sentence. That's the whole point, really. The complexity is still there in the data, in the logic, in the assumptions, in the dependencies, in the failure points. It just isn't always visible to the person building. And when complexity is hidden, people tend to underestimate it. And that is where problems live, in what wasn't examined, in what looked fine, in what nobody knew to question, in what was sold before it was understood. Hidden complexity is still complexity. I keep coming back to that because it sounds obvious once you say it plainly. But a lot of current conversation depends on pretending it isn't true. So, where I land is not anti no code, not at all. I'm anti misunderstanding. I'm anti overconfidence. I'm anti selling things you do not actually understand. Those are different positions, and I think they should stay different. If you're building something casual for yourself, fine. Explore, experiment, see what happens. That's part of how people learn. But if you're building something real, something other people will depend on, then I think you should understand what you built. Not perfectly, not exhaustively, but enough to be accountable for it. That's the standard I keep returning to. Understanding before confidence, clarity before claims. And maybe that sounds less exciting than the marketing language. It probably is, but excitement fades. Consequences don't. So that's where I'll leave this for now. There's more to say, probably, and I'm sure my thinking will keep shifting as the tools shift. I'm still thinking out loud.